Hello, my name is Odette McIntyre, and I'm a Master Gardener with the Ottawa-Carleton Master Gardeners. Welcome to this inspiring presentation titled Balcony Bounty by our own Master Gardener, Heather McDonald. Heather comes from a family of gardeners on both sides, and as she says so well, gardening is in her blood. Heather has had an interest in gardening for most of her life, with lots of gardens, big and small, wherever life took her. She's currently working towards the horticulture certificate at University of Guelph and hopes to take it to the diploma level with a focus on arboriculture and urban agriculture. Heather lives in the wilds of Canada and loves inspiring others to garden, including her 2-year-old grandson. If you have any questions during the presentation, our Master Gardener buddy today is Judith Cox. She will be monitoring the chat. So please type your questions in the chat and we will answer them at the end. And now here is Heather.
Thank you very much, Odette. Welcome, everyone. And I hope that today I can inspire you to grow something on your balcony or balcony space or small space if you haven't done this already. So it's really fun. And the benefit about it is that my balcony, as many other balconies, are close to the house or your kitchen sometimes. And so you can just reach out and grab something yummy for a salad or for dinner. And it's really exciting to be able to do that, especially if you don't have another space in which to grow edibles. So I just want to mention 3 really important things for success, no matter what it is you choose to grow. Today, I'm going to talk about cherry tomatoes and strawberries and a bit about herbs because that's what I happen to have this year. You really need enough sun. You must have enough sun. If you don't, your harvest is just not going to happen in time and you're going to be disappointed. So before you do anything, really be honest and assess how much sun your edibles are going to get. You really have to pay attention to watering, much more so because the plants are going to depend on you to keep them watered at the right time regularly, as opposed to having it rain on your garden if your garden is outside. The other thing you have to worry about is fertilizing your plants because they really need to be fertilized. Plants make food using the sun, but fertilizing is kind of like giving them vitamins. So if you give them the right vitamins at the right time, they will produce for you and keep producing. The other points I'm going to talk about are basically the kind of pot that's the best, a soil mix that's recommended, staking and when to stake, harvesting your bounty, and sharing or not sharing with wildlife, because where I live, have to share with my wildlife and just suck it up. So sun, and more sun, that's really the key here. And really, you need to ensure that your edibles will get about 6 hours of sun at minimum. Because vegetables and berries need plenty of sun time. They need to grow and develop those flowers before they fruit. And then they need sun to ripen. So without sun for a length of time every day, they're not going to happen. It's just, they're not going to be ripe. So there's 2 general tips I want to share with you. If you're in a zone 5A, which is more or less the Ottawa region, you need to start your plants as early as possible after the last predicted frost. Now, this year we had some frost very unexpectedly, and I was whipping my plants in off the balcony because it was dropping down below 10, and we had, I think you'll remember those frosts. Some of our local farmers lost a lot of their strawberries because it was an unusual frost that we had. So be prepared to bring your pots in every night until the last frost danger is past. Then they'll be fine. The other thing that works really well is if you're looking for plants like cherry tomatoes, for example, you want to try and find plants that are marked as indeterminate, which means that they'll keep producing their wonderful fruit or berries or cherry tomatoes until the frost comes. And you want to also look for things that say that they're early maturing. And typically It won't say maturing on the label, but it will say something like 60 to 65 days or less than 70 days. So if it says that, you've got an early maturing variety. So that means that they're going to ripen more quickly, they're going to develop more quickly, and they're just going to produce lots and lots. So if you see your local garden center cherry tomato called the Super Sweet 100, that's a wonderful early indeterminate variety. Those are the ones that I'm growing particularly. There are lots of other ones though, but it just so happens that it's a good example of showing what appears on the label. So for example, even though the little label is really small, it has all that valuable information on the label. So read the labels when you look as well and ask if they don't have them labeled. Early Girl is another good choice if you like larger sort of regular sized tomatoes, but that's an early maturing tomato as well. And lastly, the same thing for strawberries. If you want to grow strawberries in a basket, which I'm doing, they do have some maturing varieties that are slightly earlier, but strawberries do take longer. So again, that sun tip is so important. The sooner you get them into the sun, the faster they're going to turn red. And that's what you want. So let's talk about watering. So tomatoes and strawberries need regular watering, especially. So they have those demands where it's up to you to make sure that they are well watered, and sometimes every day when it's really hot. The pots will dry out much faster than if they're in the ground. Don't depend on the rain, because it might rain a lot, it might rain a little, but your plants may not even get any rain if your balcony has an overhang. And that's something that people forget about. So they can still dry out and wilt. And they will wilt and dry out much faster than if they're in raised beds. So be aware of that. So testing the soil is easy. If you're not sure if your tomato plants have enough water, just push your finger down to the second knuckle. And if the soil feels dry, rather than damp and cool, you better water those plants. Water to make sure that it runs right out. So once you see that, you know that they've been watered right down to the roots. Make sure they don't sit in the water, of course, and then they're good, okay? Another reason to check your plants every day is, of course, against any plant diseases, although balcony plants tend to be less subject to a lot of the diseases that afflict gardens and pests. Although, you know, I have chipmunks that regularly come up to my balcony, they scale the brick wall and they take a tomato. And I've learned to live with that. But they are less prone to infestations. And the other benefit is you can bring your plants inside for any reason or move them around to take advantage of sun and rain as well. So again, if there's a spring frost predicted, you can bring your plants in and they'll be okay. So I'd like to talk now about fertilizing. So the three things were lots of sun, making sure you pay attention to watering your plants, and fertilizing them. So when they're first planted, cherry tomatoes, when you first plunk them in, you give them a little fertilizer. And of course, I use a compost tea, and an organic fertilizer is also really good because they're made with organic ingredients as opposed to the synthetic fertilizers, which are not. So being aware of that, if you choose to use a synthetic fertilizer, is fine, but just try to find one that's lower in nitrogen, because nitrogen will tend to make the plants grow really fast and push out a lot of foliage, but it won't necessarily help them blossom and fruit. Okay, so just be aware of that. And again, it can be a granular fertilizer, it can be water soluble, compost tea, or the spikes that people like to use and push down into the soil. It's fine. It doesn't matter as much. It's more about what's actually in the fertilizer that's important. Okay. And also to remember that if you put fertilizer in, which you should be doing regularly throughout the season, just put it into the soil. Don't water the stems or the leaves with the fertilizer. So now I'd like to mention about containers. My pots are plastic. Doesn't really matter whether you have plastic pots or ceramic pots. What's really important is the size and whether or not they have drainage, because without that, you are going to be in trouble. So tomato plants, as a lot of other vegetable plants, need lots of space. So typically you put one tomato plant per pot, and your containers need to be at least 14 inches in diameter and a foot deep with good drainage. Some people like to use grow bags. Those are totally fine. It's not about so much the type of container as it is whether or not it has good drainage and it's the right size. So they need lots of room. So one tomato plant per pot is usually the rule. If you can find an organic loam soil mix for vegetables, so it's indicated for vegetables because it's typically lighter, it won't compact in a container, and it drains well. That's the greatest one to use, but you can mix your own by using a light potting soil and mix it with an organic compost, and that will work just as fine. The other thing you need to worry about is staking your tomatoes. And you can see from the picture, this is one of my tomato plants on my balcony, and I have a tiny, tiny balcony, okay? It's unbelievable how fast they grew. So I started staking them right away. I had a tomato cage around it. I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but there's also cedar stakes in there as well, because they just grew like crazy. And cherry tomatoes often do. They can grow up to 6 or 7 feet, if you can believe it. So you really want to stake them when you start planting them. And then as they grow, you can just add stakes or change them and add plant ties, and they'll be very happy. Just prepare for height. You can't even see the bottom of the pot. That's how tall the plant is. You can't even see the top of the plant in the photo. Okay, so let's talk about strawberries, because this is so much fun to do. It's a hanging pot, as you can see. It's plastic and it has a drainage component in the bottom, so it's never sitting in water. And the strawberries that you can get at garden centers do like to be hanging. They're actually designed for that, because they support long trailers which flower, which are very pretty, and then you have these delicious strawberries that come out. And again, they will, if you get them into the sun early, they'll continue to give you strawberries until the frost. But they're much more sensitive to frost. So again, I can unhook the pot if there's some bizarre frost coming. I can unhook the pot and bring it in, and it'll be fine. Lots of sun, good drainage, light soil mix, just like with the edibles, the tomatoes. 1 or 2 plants per pot is about all you can fit. And check them before you water, because again, they don't like as much water as the tomatoes do. Fertilization is the same. Get them started early with fertilizing, and then a gentle fertilizer every week or 2 weeks, and they will give you lots of strawberries. I'm still getting strawberries off mine. So harvesting your bounty. Pick and enjoy the cherry tomatoes as soon as they turn red. Also, you can defeat a lot of the other 4-footed pests that come when they're red as well. So you want to try and get them before they do. But even the ones that are sort of dark orange and not fully red, you can pick them and let them ripen in the kitchen, and they'll be just fine. You can see in the picture, I have a little bowl. I just took those off my plant yesterday. And they're just wonderful. They taste so good, and my goodness, you can just eat them without anything. So it's really a joy to be able to pick them. As your plants get big, as you saw in the picture previously, once they get to be really tall and lots of leaves and lots of green tomatoes on them, you can actually trim away the leaves around the plant where the tomatoes are, which allows more sun to get to them. So that speeds up the ripening and also increases the air circulation. So that's better for the tomato plant anyway. So when the strawberries are red, that's when you pick them. If you pick them before they turn red, they will not ripen, whereas the cherry tomatoes will continue to ripen. If it gets close to a frost, so into the fall where we get these fall frosts, and you're concerned, you can bring your plant in and continue to put it outside for the sunny days, or you can take off the green tomatoes and keep them in the kitchen in a paper bag or a box, and they'll continue to get red and they'll be just as delicious. And I put that little cartoon down at the bottom because I couldn't resist it, where it's an angry tomato saying, "Eat potatoes." But sorry, we love our tomatoes. So I recommend trying this. In terms of the herbs, which I didn't really talk about too much, all the things I mentioned pretty well apply to the herbs in terms of lots of sun, careful watering, and some fertilization. And the only other thing to know about herbs is, because then they will continue till the first frost as well, is to, if you see them flower at the top, to pinch the flowers off, because otherwise they will start to go to seed. Very often that changes the taste of the herb and they can be quite bitter. And it's basically a signal that the herb is going to start going to seed and it's finished. So if you want to continue to enjoy your basil or your thyme or oregano, whatever you're growing, just pinch those tops off. They'll leaf out more and you'll be able to harvest them a lot longer. So there is a short handout that I made, which lists the key points in this presentation, and it's available to you through Master Gardeners. So there is a link that you can request the handout to be sent to you. And if you're on YouTube and you want a copy, you send a request as well to the same Gmail address, Master Gardeners of Ottawa-Carleton.ttl@gmail.com.
Oh, thank you.
This is one of my critters. This is one of my critters. I captured him red-handed.
Oh, what a little darling.
Tomatoes. So this is time for questions, anyone?
Yes, your chipmunk is gorgeous and annoying both at the same time.
Yes.
Now, Claudia has a question. She says her tomatoes in her container are sort of a greenish yellow color, whereas the tomatoes she has directly in the ground are nice and red. Any ideas on this?
I would first look at how much sun the container tomatoes are getting, because it sounds as if they're starting to ripen. If they're green and yellow, they're starting to ripen, but much more slowly. So it must be that her tomatoes outside in a raised bed or something, I would imagine, are getting more sun. And maybe they were even planted a little sooner. So I would be asking about that as well.
Okay.
How much sun do they get?
What about trimming tomato vines? Should we have a single main stalk, or is that only for determinate tomatoes? What's your thought on this?
A single stalk vine. I think it's really about keeping it staked and not so much cutting the vine, which is the main source of the nutrients coming up into the plant from the roots. But you can trim the leaves around the tomatoes, as I mentioned. So if there's a tomato growing and there's lots of leaves around it, you can trim off those leaves to allow the air and the sun to help that tomato ripen a little faster.
Are there any other vegetables or fruit that you would recommend growing on a balcony in a smaller space?
There's so many that you can grow. Pole beans are good. Cucumbers. Certainly nothing big that grows along the ground like, squash or pumpkin so much, but some people have grown zucchini. Pole beans are great. Again, space, is a consideration. So if you need height, you've got to make sure you've got the height and the air circulation around your plant. So you can't put too many plants. Don't crowd them. Rather to have 1, 2, or 3 good producing healthy plants than 6 or 7 that are fighting to survive.
Yeah. What about putting chicken wire or netting around the strawberries? Do you think that would
Yes,
help?
it can help. For example, if your strawberries are in a, let's say they're in a like a window box style planter, for example, where they're more accessible to pests. I would recommend the plastic chicken wire. I actually have that as well, and I have used it very successfully when my plants were young, because some of them I grew from seed, and the squirrels and the chipmunks would come and they would start digging in the earth. And even though they weren't going to eat anything, they would dig up the tender little seedlings and they would be dead. So to protect them, I recommend the plastic chicken wire. It's a lot safer than the metal stuff, which can hurt you or hurt animals. And it's easy to cut, it's easy to form. You can use zip ties to close it. Yes, definitely, if you're having a problem, try that.
What do you think about growing lettuce on the balcony?
Well, again, lettuce is another one of those that might work, and it's all about the sun. It's all about the light and the watering. So I would definitely try it, especially if you've got a sort of a long style planter, just as if it's like a mini row. You could definitely try some lettuce varieties in there. Sure. Spinach.
They they don't mind a little bit of shade either. So
No, you can definitely get away with sort of a sun part shade arrangement for things like lettuce and spinach. Just be aware that they still need that sun.
There's also a suggestion from Helen about sort of like a succession growing where you'd have an early crop and then replant.
Yes, you could definitely. Yes, definitely you could do that if you've got a plan for specific edibles, and you know exactly when they're going to mature, then you can make a plan to put in a second crop. It's all about the maturation, the number of days that you need, and when you start.
Now, may I ask how you handle compost? Do you have a composter on your balcony? Do you compost in your house? Or is there some way that you handle that?
I had a composter out in the garden and it was very unsuccessful. I didn't like it. I'm not fond of the regular composters because I don't find they work very well. And I don't compost in my house. I have a green bin, but it's green bin stuff. It goes out to the city. However, in order to have that compost tea, I actually purchase a very good quality compost tea, and I make the tea. So it comes in like a tea bag, and I make it with water in a like a liter or 2 liter bucket, and water my plants with it, and it's fantastic. There are recipes to make your own compost tea, but it's fairly complicated, and you need the space to do it. And I just find between the labor and the space, sometimes it's too complicated. So I recommend either the organic fertilizers, which are available, or the compost tea, which is also available in Ottawa, and it's great.
Amanda would like to know, how can you tell if you've over fertilized? And I would like to add, how do you fix this? Yeah, tough one.
Yeah. Well, the thing about using the organic stuff or compost is it's really hard to over fertilize. Generally speaking, when you have fertilization problems, you're using a synthetic fertilizer, and you will see various things happen. For example, if it's one of these commercial fertilizers that says, grow big plants and all this kind of stuff, that's the key. Grow big plants means it's got a ton of nitrogen in it, which will make big plants, definitely, but it won't necessarily do anything good for your plant in the long run. And if you use it outside, let's say you use it in a container or use it outside, it's not good for the soil. It doesn't actually help the soil. Good soil already has nutrients in it. So all you want to do is kind of encourage that soil to stay nutritious. And that's why the organic compost or the fertilizer is so much better. If you've got plants that are just growing like crazy, really fast, chances are that's a sign that they're being over fertilized. If, for example, you've not been careful about the fertilizing, the plants can look like they're burnt. And that's typically with synthetics, not with compost, never. The only other thing that about compost is you don't want to drive out to your local farm and buy some manure, because that's what they call hot compost, and it's too strong. So if you buy compost that's already been processed, it's gentle, it's ready for your plants, and that's the kind of stuff to use.
Excellent. Is there anything you think you'd like to try next year on your balcony?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to try more cherry tomatoes because they were so successful, and I just love them. They're a personal favorite. I might even try a regular tomato. The strawberries for sure, and the herbs for sure. So that's already 3 different things. But I think I might even try pole beans or lettuce. I might try that. I get a lot of, my balcony cooks, so I really have to.
Perfect.
I get a lot of sun. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So Judith, if you want to ask the next question, and then we'll wrap after that.
Is there anything that we can still start in a container for our balcony today?
I would say at this point in time, your best bet is to buy something that's fairly mature now. So that leaves out a lot of things. But for example, there are still a lot of places where you can buy good, for example, a nice big bushy basil plant. That'll go right to the frost, and you can continue to enjoy it. So there are a few herbs that you can maybe find that are well developed and you can put right into a pot, and I would say that's just probably about it at this point in time.
Or some lettuce seeds, maybe.
Perhaps lettuce seeds.
Mine are all coming up again.
But yeah, and if you've got the good conditions and look after them well, you might get a little bit of a yield before it gets too cold.
Thank you. Sorry, Odette.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's time to say thank you to thanks, Heather. I think this was a great advice you gave us today on balcony and small spaces. There's no question in my mind that gardening is in your blood, as you stated before. And I wish you the best success in your studies as well.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for participating today and for the questions. They were great questions.
Right. Thanks also to Judith for all your help for handling the questions. I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in today, and invite you to join again next week for another Travel Talk live presentation on a really awesome topic on fairy gardens. All right. So have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.